Since reflection is so closely allied with the factory pattern, we took a small detour into looking at what exactly reflection is. We learned how it can do a whole bunch of things for us at runtime, and then we learned about its various pitfalls. So, given all of this, what is reflection good for? What are some of the situations where we can use this? Now, it turns out that there do exist certain situations where reflection is the only and the best game in town. Let's take a look at one of these so we understand the full range of what reflection has to offer us. Now, we've spoken a whole bunch about coding. Let's take a segue and talk a little bit about testing. Say if you have a small bit of code whose only job is to run unit tests on a much bigger bit of code. So you have this production code and you have this other code which just runs unit tests on code which is going to go to production. What is a unit test, you might ask? This is a test which applies to a single small unit. For instance, this unit can be a class. It can be a method within a class. Each of this provides or performs one logical piece of action. And testing this piece of action is the responsibility of the unit test which is written for that method or for that class. The idea is that to test each individual unit using unit testing, which ensures that the logical blocks which make up the whole are performing correctly, and then test the interworkings of these units via something called integration testing. So each unit is tested and we have confidence that it works correctly. Then we see how these units integrate with each other. That is integration testing. After both unit and integration testing is done, the output of the entire system is then checked. This is called end-to-end testing or validation testing. Now, beyond all this, we check for functional correctness of code which is running on production. You might want to ensure that the non-functional aspects also work correctly. What are non-functional aspects? This relates to the performance of your code based on the input load that it has to bear. So load testing is done after all the functional correctness have been verified using unit tests, integration tests, and validation tests. That's all very well. Let's just focus on unit testing for now and see how reflection can help us immensely here. The old school approach to unit testing involves setting up two pieces of code. One is the actual unit tests which have to be run to test the code which is going on production. So we have the code which is doing the actual testing. So basically we have a whole multitude of classes which is the real production code which is exposed to users, and then we have these tests. So we have test class 1, test class 2 and test class 3. These are the tests or the unit tests which test that the code in production is running correctly. You have the tests, but you want some piece of code which actually loops through these tests and runs them all. Maybe you want to run them every hour or every 3 hours. So that is the unit tester. The unit tester will explicitly call test class 1, test class 2, test class 3, loop through all the test methods and call them one by one. That is the job of the unit tester. Both of these live in different jar files, meaning they are different libraries. So far so good. We are in a good shape. We have all the unit tests and we have the unit tester which is responsible for running these unit tests on production code. But then, if we have a new class that gets added to production, we'll add a new class to the code being tested. Now, the only way for the unit tester to keep up is that the unit tester itself has to be updated and the unit tester has to be rebuilt and redeployed. Let's pause and see all the places that the change has to be made. We first have new functionality in production to meet some new need. Obviously, we want to unit test this. So we add some functionality in the unit tester to test that new functionality in production. Then as a third step, we have to go ahead and modify the unit test framework and call the new test method. That's a whole lot of changes. We ought to be able to eliminate some of this. So basically what will happen then is we will call test class 4. This test class 4 is added to the set of unit tests which we want to run. So changes are made not only to the tests themselves, but also to the unit testing framework. A very good question to ask at this point is, why do we need to recompile and rerun the unit tester? That's a real problem in my opinion. Nothing has changed in the unit tester. It just needs to call all the tests. That's where ReFlection comes to the rescue. This is an awesome use case for using ReFlection, and let's see how that helps us. So we have the same setup as before. We have the bunch of unit tests which have to be run. And we have the unit testing framework which calls each test one by one. And these are in different jar files or different libraries. And they can be built separately. That's where the different jar files, the importance of that comes in. So we have class 1, 2, 3, 4, which have the test methods, test method 1, test class 2, test class 3, and so on. Same setup as before. Now, in the unit tester, we can use ReFlection and type introspection to get all the methods from all the test classes which are named test class XXX. Basically, we can go into the testing library, find all the methods which we identify as test methods, and basically we can say that a test method is one which starts with test class. Once we do that, we just call these methods one by one. Because ReFlection and type introspection allows us to dive into another library, which is in a different jar file, not its own, allow us to find all these methods. We don't actually need to explicitly call these methods. Now say that production code changes in response to which you've added a new method called test class 4. What do you need to do? Of course, you need to rerun the unit tests themselves. You need to rebuild them themselves. However, the unit tester remains unchanged. You do not need to rebuild the unit tester. Nothing changes on the unit tester. Things change on the test end and the production end. In fact, this unit tester is exactly like how JUnit used to work. JUnit is a very famous tool used widely by Java programmers. It used ReFlection and it used to work this way. The way it works now is more advanced. However, we don't need to worry about that for now. See what a great use case for ReFlection we have. We want to run all the test methods without changing the unit testing framework. ReFlection has saved us from recompiling another jar. This is a huge win. So we've seen the good things about ReFlection, the bad things about ReFlection. So the next time you have to write code using ReFlection, think about whether you really need it and whether it's the right use case. If it is, then there are just so many things that you could do with ReFlection.